RockShoreOffroad.com. Ah, this spin move. Look at this. Brutal. God, get that guy off the court. All right, nothing but analytics today. We're going to get into some props as well. We won't focus the entire time on the Denver Nuggets. Possibly one of the most boring best teams in the NBA. But the Denver Nuggets are our team of the day to break down from a statistical standpoint. I always have trouble with that word. Kind of like proprietary. Anyway, offensive strengths. Let's start what we always do with a lot of these teams. So the Denver Nuggets and their offensive strengths, they have quite a bit of them. The Denver Nuggets are actually surprisingly a very good team, especially if you break them down from a numbers perspective. The 9th best offensive efficient team in the NBA, 112 points per 100 possessions. One of the best offensive rebounding teams in the NBA. 3rd best in offensive rebounding rate of 27.9%. And we'll get into it when we get to specific matchups as well. But that key stat is actually a big reason why I'm really intrigued in their matchup with the Houston Rockets. Regardless, I digress. Long mid-range shooting. They are one of the best teams in the NBA. 3rd best, 46.1%. Mid-range shooting overall, 42%. 9th best mark in the NBA. Corner three-point shooting, which is interesting because as we've talked about, corner three-point shooting a lot of the times is tied in with your rim percentage. If you're good at the rim, generally you're pretty good at corner shooting because you can actually kick it out to guys. But corner three-point shooting, 4th best in the NBA, 41.1%. And your half-court offensive rebounding rate, so in possessions that are considered half-court, they have the best offensive rebounding rate in the NBA. So we're going to use this to kind of tie in weaknesses as well with the Denver Nuggets because I have brought this up before, and we will continue to beat this through because what has been, if you're a fan of the NBA, if you're a fan of basketball in general, one of the things that we have talked about, and just basketball in general has talked about multiple times, and you know what we're going to go with, is the death of the mid-range shot. And one of the common misconceptions of the death of the mid-range shot is it's not for specific players, right? We talked about it with the Clippers. A player like Kawhi Leonard can live around the mid-range because he is playing at the level that he does, and he he shoots the ball as well as he does within the mid-range. But when you're a team, you don't want to build your offense around the mid-range. And that's what we talk about when you say the death of the mid-range shot. It's not so much player by player, it's teams in general are cutting down the amount of shots they take within the mid-range because it's an inefficient shot. If you look at the frequency numbers for the Denver Nuggets, in terms of mid-range shots, 33.9% of their shots come within the mid-range. That's all mid-range shots. That is the 5th most in the NBA. Long mid-range shots, 13.4% of their shots are outside of 14 feet, right? Free throw line distance, but inside the three-point arc, right? Short mid-range shots, 4 to 14 feet. They have the 7th most shots, 20.5%. And then you look at the rim, right, which I was talking about, because generally if you're successful at the rim, the corner three-point attempts follow. They're actually 19th in terms of the frequency at which they take shots within 4 feet. Just 34.7% of their shots come within 4 feet. They're really accurate at the rim, but they don't take a lot of shots there. And this, to me, has always been the problem that I feel like when I watch the Denver Nuggets, when I watch a team like the Indiana Pacers, that's similarly how they build their offense and where they come from in terms of, shooting from the mid-range. Their thriving offense comes when their mid-range shots are falling. All of these numbers are relatively good, right? Like a high clip in mid-range despite, and you're taking a high amount of shots. However, you've seen it play out in playoff series before. The Portland Trailblazers series, for example, we were talking about with Doug Kazarian earlier today, right? There were many times where their offense starts to fall flat because not only are you taking inefficient shots like long two-point attempts, but when they're not falling, your offense really starts to fall off. And then you get into the other aspects of this, right? For example, for the Denver Nuggets, we talked about how good their corner threes are. Three-point shooting in general, they're 15th. They just shoot 36.1% from deep. So they're not an overly efficient three-point shooting team unless they're shooting from the corners. And their mid-range shot is where all their offense comes from. They don't necessarily attack the rim. And that also ties into one of their offensive weaknesses, which we can throw in, right? Talked about the non-corner three-point shooting. Look at that free throw rate. They're 25th in the NBA in terms of the free throw rate. Now, we talk about jump shooting teams all the time, but some of these jump shooting teams, as we call them, right, like the Rockets or like the Warriors, they also have guys who can continuously attack the rim. The Nuggets don't have that, and that's why you have a free throw rate that's 25th in the NBA, because at times you have to be able to draw contact, you got to get opposing players in foul trouble, and you have to get to the free throw line. The free throw line, other than, like a wide open Curry attempt, is one of the most efficient spots on the floor because it's exactly what it's called. They're free throws at the basket. They're free attempts at points. And if you can't draw free throws, that is going to be a massive weakness. And it's come up for the Denver Nuggets time and time again, and it's going to continue to do so. So your offensive weaknesses at this point, we mentioned it a little bit, but the non-corner three-point shooting, again, around the arc, not the corners, 34.6%, the 20th worst rate through this Western Conference as it is built right now, because some of the things that they don't do well on both sides of the ball are things that are really going to hold them back and are things that championship teams usually do extremely well. So the Denver Nuggets, there's your nothing but analytics, your statistical breakdown of where they're at. We did have a couple of props I wanted to put out there because FanDuel has these up now. And index props, look, index props are generally not really profitable for you. The hold percentage is pretty good for a lot of these operators, but it is interesting to look at a couple of these. We can throw these up. So we have exact finals matchups over at FanDuel. Of course, the Milwaukee Bucks and the Los Angeles Lakers being the favorite or the most likely finals matchup that you have over at FanDuel, 3-1. Behind them, Bucks versus Clippers, plus 370. I'll say this again. I think the Clippers are the best team in the NBA. I think it is most likely that they make it out of the Western Conference. Yes, there is technically, according to where I put teams, value in like a plus 370 for Bucks and Clippers. But given the unknown of Orlando, given the unknown of COVID-19, who's going to be on the floor, who's not worth investing at plus 370. But you do get some interesting matchups, right? There are a lot of people who generally think, like actually Kazarian mentioned this, not so much his support for the Rockets, but that the Rockets are going to be a really high variance team and that they could, Adam Stanko in the clip of the week, you mentioned it, that they could be a team that throws a wrench in a lot of this. Some of the Rockets matchups, you're getting really fat numbers. Bucks and Rockets, 11-1. You look at, I know that Triv, one of our producers in the back, was talking about, what was it, Bucks and Rockets, or was it Bucks and Rockets? Or Raptors and Rockets. Yeah, Raptors and Rockets in the range of like 20-25-1. So the Rockets are an interesting team. And, of course, we've talked about the Toronto Raptors before, how good they are. And maybe match up a little poorly. But the finals matchups, exact matchups, up at FanDuel. You can wager on these for your betting pleasure. Again, I wouldn't necessarily recommend betting really any of these. Given the unknown of what's going to happen in Orlando and what's happening with the health of some of these players and the coronavirus and if guys have to get quarantined and whatnot. But it is interesting to look at some of these exact finals matchups, and you can also gauge, right, the power rating on certain teams. Like personally, I've talked about this before, the way they match up with Milwaukee. Anything with Philadelphia, I think, is kind of inflated, considering how well everything could play out and the fact that they're all playing on a neutral. But you do have those. Now, I will say this: do we have the what was the other one I sent you? Was it improved player? Yeah, improved player. Can we throw this up? I found this one actually really interesting because this obviously doesn't have much to do with Orlando. You're only having 8 regular season seeding games. It's not going to affect voting one way or the other. But FanDuel had posted that Bam Adebayo was the odds-on favorite to win Most Improved Player in the NBA. Not that I don't think Bam Adebayo should be at the top of the list in terms of the odds, but to be an odds-on favorite, I think is fascinating because, and this is just kind of speculation. You got to do this with a lot of the awards, right? You can throw out a lot of numbers. Bam Adebayo, I think, could probably win the award. He's had a fascinating year, and he has been one of the more improved players of the NBA. But you have to look at this from a voter's perspective, and let's be frank, we have seen a lot of the times that voters are not educated with a lot of these players, and I wonder if a guy like Bam Adebayo, who plays a position that he does, right, center / power forward big for the Miami Heat, is going to garner the votes that he should get to the point where he should be an odds-on favorite, right? There's a lot of other candidates, among them a guy like a Jason Tatum, who has really come on strong for a top 3 seed in the Eastern Conference in the Boston Celtics. Jason Tatum has had a fascinating year, and you can get in the range of 10-1 on a guy like Jason Tatum to win Most Improved. That's going to be fascinating. How about Luka Doncic? You can get in the range of 4-1 in terms of Most Improved Player too. So I think that's going to be really interesting to see what's going to happen for the Most Improved Player. But to have a guy like Bam Adebayo as the odds-on favorite, I think is really interesting just from the standpoint of I'm not sure if he's going to, of course, garner enough votes, and I don't think that there's enough writers who vote for this that pay attention enough to actually give it to Bam Adebayo. But, of course, we will see. All right, Edge is over with. It's Friday. You have a very good weekend. Enjoy the golf tournament. Enjoy the fights. We'll be back on Monday. Make sure to check out VSiN.com/bestbets if you missed out anything. Cool little podcast forum. You can listen wherever you go. Have a good weekend, everybody.